The King Shaka International Airport has kicked off a comprehensive 12-year rehabilitation program to the restoration of natural environment that was impacted by airport development. The program covers over 854 hectares, making it the largest area to be rehabilitated in the region. King Shaka International Airport is one of the three biggest airports in South Africa. It is designed to accommodate over 7 million passengers each year. It is also the airport company South Africa's first greenfield airport, built 35 kilometers north of Durban in La Mercy. The area, known for its rich biodiversity, the airport management says the ambitious rehabilitation plan is aimed at enhancing terrestrial and wetlands ecosystems. Officials say despite the aviation industry being negatively impacted by COVID-19, environmental compliance and management remains top of their agenda. Now, to discuss this issue further, we are now joined by King Shaka International Airport Senior Manager for Operational Governance, Nokuthula Mcinga. Ms. Mcinga, very good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the Globe.
Good evening, and good evening to the listeners at home.
First of all, take us through these 854-hectare 12-year rehabilitation plan. How is it going to be rolled out?
All right, so we first developed a rehabilitation plan to guide us how we do the rollouts. The plan is in phases. It's in 3 phases. It looks at the invasive alien species. It looks at the terrestrial species. It also looks at the wetland biodiversity rehabilitation. And the species are quite different, and therefore even the timeline that is being set to roll out the plan, it aligns with that. The invasive species, we already started doing that, and we had very good success in implementing that. The terrestrial species, the terrestrial biodiversity, the plan, it focuses on how do we then rehabilitate the area that is initially was used for sugarcane farming, and some of it's fallow fields. So the plan addresses all of those issues as to how do we detail it at phase over the 12-year, but it will be implemented in perpetuity. Wetlands also one of the critical ecosystems that we have within the airport, and the purpose of including them in the rehabilitation plan was to ensure that we reinstate them into their natural state. Okay. We focus high risk in the rollout of the rehabilitation plan. It's a very intensive plan, and it includes monitoring to ensure that whatever interventions that we are implementing are effective.
Let's talk about the funding model, Ms. Mcinga. How much is it going to cost, and who's funding it?
It's very difficult at the moment to confirm how much the plan for over 12 years is going to cost the company. Yes, we've done some initial estimates, but we are dealing with natural systems, and we have implemented intervention, the initial interventions, and those interventions were very successful. It also depends on the type of the environment for an example, as to what is the extent of rehabilitation that is required. So we are hoping that with initial interventions that we have implemented, we will be able to reduce the cost of the rehabilitation. As I said, there are too many elements to be specific on the cost, because the plan is very detailed, and rolling it out over the years, it will also depend on the type of the environment, whether these interventions are being effective.
So how has the construction of the airport impacted the environment around the entire area?
All right, so the airport impacted on the 295 hectares. So that was the initial impact. of 295 hectares of the secondary grasslands, as well as the scrubs and the woodlands. Also included the 16 hectares of the wetlands. And when we worked on the plan for the rehabilitation of these ecosystems, we use for the wetlands, we use the 1:3 ratio. And currently, we are looking at rehabilitating 48 hectares of the wetlands. And for the terrestrial, because there were other sensitive environment on the south of the airport, we ended up including it in the Kitty for conservation, and hence the number that came to more than 800 hectares to be rehabilitated. So the plan and the strategy that we've developed is to minimize this impact and to make sure that we reinstate the environment that was impacted, and also to work on the other aspects that might be impacting on the communities, like noise, because our operation are deemed to be noisy to the communities.
Now, as a hub of complex transport movement, technical operations, and as well as surface access transport, how is the King Shaka International Airport addressing its carbon dioxide emissions issue?
All right. So if you look at the airports globally, they contribute around 2% of the carbon dioxide. And looking at the airport is it's a system. It's an aviation system. Mm-hmm. You need to look at the entire chain, as well as the other contributors that contribute into the carbon dioxide. But as an airport, I just want to assure you that we level 2 accredited. We've got a carbon accreditation by the Airport Council International. Level 2, meaning that we have mapped and identified all our sources of carbon emissions, and we have developed a strategy for ensuring that these emissions are being reduced. Over and above that, we introduce operational measures so as to control further emission that might be originating from the aircraft as it is on the parking stands or within the airport. We've introduced what you called fixed ground units, and we've encouraged the airlines that are using the airport while at the airport to connect into those units instead of using the auxiliary power. So this means that emissions that you will be getting from the aircraft itself are being reduced. But the other factor is the increased turnaround time. When we're handling the aircraft, it means that the aircraft will be within the airport or within the parking stand shorter than anticipated. So these are all the measures that we are implementing to make sure that we are reducing our impact. But also, again, we are licensed in terms of the emission. We do have an emission license that looks at our air quality within the airports. And the results that we have been getting over years, they indicate that our emissions still remain below the threshold that is regulated in the regulations. Yeah.
Well, as you mentioned earlier on, the airport operates as a system. In short, it's
Yes.
different units in unison as part of the entire machinery of the King Shaka International Airport. And as you know, airports around the world, are sort of undeniably the major contributors of air and noise pollution. So how will this project then mitigate the issue of noise pollution?
All right. So noise pollution, we as an airport have installed the noise monitoring units within the airport as well as within the areas that fall within the noise zone. So that falls within the noise footprint. So we firstly had to develop the noise contours that guide us where are the areas that are concentrated for the noise. And then after that, we installed noise monitoring terminals that are being monitored 24 hours. It gives us data as to what is the level impact that our operation has in the surrounding community. But as part of that, we also measure the community noise. In certain areas, we find that community noise is higher than that of the aircraft noise, because also if you look at the design of the new model aircraft, it was designed to cater for your noise issues, to cater for your air emissions. So your newly built aircraft, they cater for that, but you still do get higher noise levels in certain areas. Over and above that, we've adopted an Icao balance approach, which instruct the airport to look at 4 pillars. One, it's your land use planning. 2, it's your development of noise abatement measures, development of noise procedures, as well as monitoring. So we have defined our noise abatement measures. We are implementing the noise procedures. I'll make an example. One of the things that was creating more noise in the area was the early hour aircraft that were called Chapter 2. And in our influence as the organization, we were able to convince or lobby for the Chapter 2 aircraft to be phased out. So this was one of the wins.
Okay. We're out of time, unfortunately, Ms. Mcinga, but just briefly, you've just taken us through the various mechanism of, pollution that the airport needs to fend off every now and then, including air pollution, noise pollution, and as well as the carbon dioxide emission. And there's also the issue of birds, which are said to be colliding with some of the aircraft. And remember that between October 2020 and April 2021, an estimated 3 million barn swallows, which is a form of bird species, flocked to a reed bed near the airport from Eastern Europe during summer. So how do you ensure that you keep these birds at bay from colliding with the aircraft?
King Shaka is the first commercial airport to have what we call the bird radar. Mm-hmm. Bird radar, it was installed specifically to monitor how the aircraft will impact on these European barn swallows.
Okay.
Yeah, and it is monitored, and it gives you the signal when the aircraft will collide with the birds, and that signal is then sent to the tower, and the tower then informs the pilot for a certain procedure to be implemented. But we found that over the years, we've never experienced any excessive bird strikes of the barn swallows. They coexist. I can say that, in my view, because as much as we are monitoring them, there's never been an incident where we report a huge number of barn swallow strike. It could be maybe 1 or 2 like any other birds. So initially when the airport was, the plan for the airport was underway and the environmental impact assessment was being developed, one of the complaints from the community was that the barn swallows might be depleted because of aircraft, of which, it's not the case.
All right, Ms. Mcinga, great chatting to you. Thank you so much for your update. We do appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
All right, that was King Shaka International Airport Senior Manager for Operational Governance, Nokuthula Mcinga, joining us via Zoom.